Can an election truly be free and fair if people don't feel free to speak, assemble, or participate? As Zambia approaches the polls, a new report by Transparency International is raising concerns about the country's civic space. So is one of Southern Africa's most respected democracies facing a democratic stress test? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Here's the irony in Zambia. President Hakainde Hichilema was himself a victim of the exact tactics he's now accused of using. He was arrested for treason under the previous government, denied campaign access, and faced restrictions during his own campaign. Now, as president, the watchdogs are documenting similar patterns under his watch. On August 13th, he will be seeking a second term after his landmark victory in 2021, which was widely praised as a peaceful democratic transition. But as campaigning intensifies, so too are questions about whether everyone can participate freely and fairly. Joining me for more on this is Chimuka Nachibinga, in charge of governance and institutional strengthening at Transparency International Zambia. DW's Kathy Short in Lusaka is also with us. Welcome on board, both of you. Kathy, give us a sense of the political atmosphere in Zambia as the election approaches.
Yes, Eddie, thank you very much for the opportunity. The political atmosphere is becoming increasingly active as Zambia heads towards the August 13 general elections, which is just in about 2 weeks, so to say. Political parties are intensifying campaigns across the country, while public debate has focused not only on economic issues such as the cost of living, jobs, and service delivery, but also on questions around democratic freedoms, the conduct of the electoral process, and public confidence in state institutions. And we've seen also both the opposition and the ruling party enjoying some great campaign captivating songs in this tense atmosphere, having fun to some of these songs, which have become some of the anthems really during this campaign period. As is common ahead of elections, political tensions have also become more visible.
Right. And it's on that part where, Chimuka, you come in, because Transparency International is sounding the alarm. You're saying that civic space is in trouble. What are the key findings from your report?
Thanks so much, Eddie, and thanks for the opportunity. Indeed, Transparency International Zambia conducted a study that's between the period of 2024 and 2025. And maybe before I come to the specific findings, just allow me to give a brief background of why we conducted such a study. Of course, as you are aware that we are an anti-corruption watchdog institution here in Zambia. And from our corruption perception index of 2025, we understand that an open civic space and also an independent media is quite important when it comes to the fight against corruption. We are coming from this background that we definitely needed to have assessed the civic space in Zambia and also assess how it contributes to the fight against corruption, but also most importantly as we head towards the 2026 general elections. So you find that worldwide, of course, when you look at the study or the report on Civicus Monitor for 2024, you find that civic space is actually mounting pressure worldwide. When you look at it from the African perspective, you understand that over 80% of the countries on the continent have been classified as repressed and obstructed or closed, which reflects restrictions on freedom of association, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly in the same Civicus report of 2024. Coming to Zambia specifically, you find that, of course, there is emerging evidence that points to persistent human rights challenges that mirror these continents and global trends that have been presented in this Civicus report.
What's the major concern right now based on what you found in your report?
So the major concern now in Zambia is that the civic space is actually obstructed in one way or the other. And this is due to a number of reasons. And perhaps maybe this is where I should come in to present the findings of this study. The country has, of course, enacted a number of pieces of legislation that are contributing to the obstruction of the civic space. Of course, some of these include the Cyber Security Act, the Cyber Crimes Act, the Old Public Order Act. Of course, all these are creating an environment that is not open with respect to opposition political parties undertaking their activities, the human rights defenders undertaking their activities, and also just freely to express themselves and also to assemble themselves. So you find that these, of course, have contributed to the shrinking civic space in Zambia. When you look at the freedom of information, is also a serious concern. As you can see that there are certain cases of arrests that have been done for journalists, and these, of course, are associated with covering events of the opposition political parties. And you can also find that when you look at, for example, the UN Rapporteur's report on freedom of opinion and expression, of course, it warned that the fundamental freedoms are actually at risk ahead of the 2026 general elections. We have also discovered that, of course, like I've mentioned, there have been arbitrary arrests, legal harassments, systemic use of public order and cyber crimes law to shrink the civic space. So basically, we have concluded from this study to say that Zambia's civic space is actually at a critical juncture. Of course, as it provides some form of entrenchment in terms of authoritarianism, and also just to shrink and close the space, especially for political parties and also the people that do actually advocacy. In addition to that, when you look at the laws that are already in place, there has been some selective enforcement, especially when it comes to the Public Order Act that usually, regulates issues of assembly and so forth and so on. So you'd find that it is much easier for the ruling party to hold their own meetings, but it's very much difficult for the opposition parties to actually hold their own meetings.
Is this new to Zambia, or is this just something that happens, ahead of every election year?
Unfortunately, I think this has been the trend, and this is emanating from the fact that we have not changed our Public Order Act since independence. I think this time around we tried to push for a public gathering bill, of course, which passed through Parliament, but it was not assented to law by the president because of a number of other reasons that also civil society organizations actually alluded to. So, from the point of view that we are standing, I think it's more of the enforcement of, not non-enforcement, but selective enforcement of the law, but also the provisions of the law themselves. Of course, they have to be, amended to ensure that they are inclusive, and also they address the current changing trends in terms of the democratic governance in our country. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for that. We'll definitely be digging deeper into what changes will be required to change situations on the ground. So, yeah, looking forward to that. But Kathy, you've been listening to this. You are on the ground. How much attention is the Transparency International report, having on people on the ground, and how's the government responding to this?
Okay. The government has consistently said it is committed to protecting democratic rights and ensuring peaceful, free and credible elections. I've heard several government officials rejecting suggestions that democratic space is shrinking, arguing that institutions are functioning and that any law enforcement actions are carried out in accordance with the law. And I've seen this at several gatherings, not just during the current Transparency International Zambia report, even with the Zambia police and other law enforcement officers, they continue to say that they are basically maintaining law and order. And in one of the meetings that I attended, some of the senior police officers were asked, why are they so suspicious that every time opposition or other divergent views come up, that they are going to cause trouble? They said we're simply maintaining order. So it's been a trend, and I agree with what Chimuka has said. Zambians and civil society and other groupings were hoping that the UPND, having suffered a lot at the hands of the previous regime, would have actually changed the situation. And so they were looking at having a better, more tolerant government that would allow for civic space to improve. But it's unfortunate that we're still talking about these issues even now ahead of the elections. At the same time, I must say also that civil society groups and opposition parties continue to express concerns about the implementation of certain laws and restrictions affecting political activities. And then also one thing I must say is that civil society organizations like Transparency International Zambia are highly regarded and looked at as credible sources of information. So yes, the government is paying attention, but they are refusing. I think it's something like, that you say, okay, they're saying this, but you still insist that it's not correct, or you are seeing things from a different perspective. The good thing is that opposition and civil society organizations and human rights defenders have continued with this same message. And I must say also that this report is actually in line with Freedom House Country Report, which gives Zambia, where Zambia is rated as partly free.
Talking about freedom, how freely are journalists able to cover election-related developments? I mean, you're a journalist. Are you facing any major difficulties, any challenges?
Yes, access to information is one, and even access to government leaders. We've been trying several times to get some of the government leaders to appear on DW, but it's been very difficult, and even just to get information. And even as a journalist, sometimes because of some of the stories that we publish, I'm called in the evenings. I've received several calls, which has never happened in my entire journalism career, telling me, we know you wrote that story and we are watching you, and I'm calling you in my official capacity as a party official. Initially, I was very scared, but I called back and I was like, I am not a public relations person. I'm a journalist and I've got a job to do in a democracy. So it's not easy. Our colleagues in the government media, it has become more common now to sing praises for the authorities, and we hardly see any negative stories. And there's this saying in public media that you have to be blind as a journalist, you have to be deaf and dumb.
After saying all of this, do you feel safe? I mean, elections is just 2 weeks away.
Yes, I do. And I'm going to cover the elections, as I've done. Just being careful where I go, and just being in safe spots.
Right. You definitely have to do all you can. And as TW always does, we keep our journalists safe on the ground as you cover the upcoming elections, and we'll be getting a lot more info from you. But Chimuka, you've been listening to all of this. I mean, with all these happenings, the credibility of the upcoming election process is definitely something that should be on the agenda, that should be talked about, right?
Definitely, yes. I mean, I would agree with Kathy in her submissions. I think a lot of things are actually happening with respect to the civic space. Unfortunately, uh, it has to deal with the targets, of course, the opposition political parties, the journalists that try to capture the oppositions, and so forth and so on. But when you see all this happening, one of the key issues that comes into our mind is the aspect of inclusivity and also issues of freedom of assembly, association, and so forth and so on. So you find that the opposition is not given that free, freely to be able to actually campaign. Just yesterday, I think when they were campaigning in Copper Belt, they were blocked actually by the police, and they had to park their vehicle somewhere and walked to the ground where they were having the rally. So you can see that these, incidents actually, infringe on the first of all the human rights, but also most importantly the freedom for the people to be able to assemble and also to actually conduct their rallies and campaigns freely, so that we can have a free and fair election, which is credible and full of integrity. So the fact that all these aspects are actually missing in terms of freedom of assembly, association, and so forth and so on, it becomes very difficult for us to then tell that, of course, the elections or the electoral period is actually free and fair. So the environment, of course, it has a mixed picture. There are some good, of course, tenants that you can see, but also there are some good elements. There are some bad elements that are actually contributing to shrinking the civic space.
Right. So what steps should authorities take to ensure a free, fair, and inclusive election? Because the clock is ticking, isn't it?
Yes. So definitely what would recommend to the authorities, especially the law enforcement agencies, is to ensure that they enforce the law, which is the Public Order Act, accordingly, without being selective. Let them leave the opposition and the independent candidates to campaign freely, so that the environment is actually balanced and so forth and so on. The other aspect that you can actually see is that because of the ruling party, you find that the president is actually maybe enjoying more of the freedom to be able to move here and there and disrupting even other, opposition political parties. I can recall, I think Hari Karaba was disrupted in Luapula province and so forth and so on. He had to change his route. ECZ chairperson indicated to say go to the other side of the province and so forth and so on. Of course, that distorts the entire programming, and this is not fair when it comes to the election-related matters. The other aspect, of course, is that the other key stakeholders that are involved in the electoral cycle, of course, issues of monitoring, issues of vote protection, issues of independent, verification, reporting on these irregularities to law enforcement agencies, other key stakeholders, I think are key important for us to be able to ensure that the campaign environment is actually leveled and gives an equal playing field to all the stakeholders that are involved in this process.
Right. And so what indicators will you be watching most closely right before, during, and after the elections to decide how the civic space has been and if the elections has been free and fair?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So for us as a watchdog organization with respect to the fight against corruption, usually we have got a skewedness towards corruption-related issues. So what we are looking for, of course, corrupt-related incidents, vote buying, issues of misinformation, bribery, and many other related aspects. Apart from that, we are also looking at campaign financing, which we are tracking just to estimate the cost of doing elections, as the country, of course, doesn't have a piece of regulation to regulate campaign financing. And as we have these presidential debates, I think this is one of the things that we are actually going to ask the president to be able to indicate when they will definitely enact this piece of legislation. The other aspects we will look for, of course, are issues relating to access to information, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and also political participation, as this is actually key when it comes to voting, but also ensuring that each and every citizen, based on the adult suffrage principle, is given an equal opportunity to participate in the electoral process.
And quick one on this: if something goes wrong, or if all of these things that you're going to be checking shows that there's serious issues, what's the next step for Transparency International to push for some sort of accountability, or to make sure that those responsible for all that went wrong are being held responsible?
Yeah, so just to make mention that, so what we do as an organization is that we already have monitors on the ground. We have over 200 monitors that we have deployed on the ground. And we have been producing advocate statements on a bi-weekly basis. But this time around, as we are going towards the election day, we will be producing these statements on a weekly basis. So if something goes wrong, of course, we engage these stakeholders that are key to the electoral process, the ECZ, the Zambia Police, the anti-corruption, just to bring, on their table the issues that we are actually collecting through our monitors. And part of the information that we generate is then used after the elections, especially for those members that do petition and so forth and so on. But for this particular period, we are actually doing what we call real-time advocacy, where issues that are, unearthed through our monitors are actually being advocated for on a weekly basis through our statements, but also targeted engagement with key stakeholders.
Right. Thank you very much, Chimuka. Kathy, you have the final words. August 13th is the general elections. What are the key developments our listeners should be watching out for?
Thank you, Eddie. Several developments will be important in the coming weeks. These include the tone of political campaigns, whether all parties are able to campaign peacefully, the response of security agencies to political events, the role of the Electoral Commission in managing the process, and whether any election-related disputes emerge. Observers will also be watching voter turnout. And I see that the Electoral Commission of Zambia, the ECZ, has been going around the country still doing voter.
Right. Thank you very much, Kathy. And of course, for those of you listening, we'll be getting a lot more information from Kathy Short, our correspondent on the ground, to see how Zambia's elections are unfolding. Thank you very much, both of you, for contributing to this discussion. Chimuka Nachibinga, in charge of governance and institutional strengthening at Transparency International, Zambia, that is, and also DW's Kathy Short in Lusaka. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for the invitation, and we hope that we can continue interacting. Even during elections, on the election day, and also after the election, so that we can give you also the environment around that particular time. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We'll definitely be keeping our eyes and ears on you and on the ground.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
Since returning to multi-party democracy in 1991, Zambia has seen several peaceful transfers of power. Now, the focus is on whether the political environment remains open ahead of this year's vote.
There's no freedom of expression. There is, whenever you want to say something, you hold yourself. You can say it. because of the cyber law.
There's no freedom in Zambia for people to assemble to talk about whatever they are not free with, because they're not allowed. The presidents are not allowing them. Even the opposition party has got no voice. The only story is about the ruling party. It's people are scared of cyber laws, because once you get caught, you're not in jail.
Democracy isn't judged only by what happens on election day. It's judged by everything that happens before and after. The freedom to speak, to organize, to question, and to choose. Zambia has built a reputation as one of Africa's democratic success stories. The coming weeks will show whether that reputation can withstand one of its biggest tests yet. What do you think? Share your thoughts on Facebook and TikTok at DW Africa. Listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. And I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.